U.S. History, Chapter 2, Section 5, Manifest Destiny, Causes and Effects of Westward Migration. So how and why Americans migrated, what were the causes and effects of the Texas War for Independence, and then what were the effects of the Mexican-American War and the California Gold Rush on the United States. So when we look at looking westward, one of the effects of the War of 1812 is that once that was over and done with, the United States kind of quits looking across the Atlantic Ocean and looks towards the Pacific. And then what you're going to see is there's a whole host of Americans who begin to become very expansionists. They want to see the United States grow westward. And in the 1840s, there's an article written that describes this concept of manifest destiny. So if you think of it as like a meme, it's this idea that the United States is destined by God to go from the Atlantic to the Pacific, from Canada to Mexico, really that at some point all of North America and perhaps South America is just going to become one big country, the United States of the Americas. And so you kind of see this in this painting titled Manifest Destiny, that you have Lady Liberty going across, and behind her is in the east agriculture and manufacturing and railroads and all sorts of new things. And she's driving the old, outdated away and replacing the darkness with light. And so that's going to kind of really describe this concept of manifest destiny. So when we look at Americans going west, there's a handful of things that are happening here. They're skipping kind of over the Great Plains. They're heading to New Mexico so that they can get access to goods and products that are being produced in Mexico and in the southern part of South America. So that's going to kind of be the connecting station there. They're going west for the fur trade. They're heading to California and Oregon, mostly for agriculture. And there's going to be other things that are going to help kind of speed that process up. And so what you're going to see is the United States, little by little, is going to grow. So here's the United States in 1820, 1840, and we're going to see how it's going to continue to grow from there. When we look at this journey westward, there's about 250,000 Americans that make this journey, 1840 to 1860. Again, they're skipping over the Great Plains. That's considered to be the Great American Desert. There's nothing worthwhile there. It's nothing but grass, and so let's just get over to the West Coast to get to the good stuff. Most Americans are doing, well, almost all of them at this time are doing it by wagon train. 2,000 miles. It takes 5 months. It's a pretty treacherous journey. You have to hope that everything works out right, that spring doesn't come late and winter come early. You really kind of need this long summer to be able to safely kind of make that journey, and then you got to hope that your wagons don't break and all of that type of stuff. There are a handful of other settlements that kind of pop up. For the Mormons, they head to Great Salt Lake City, and that's where they're going to establish their community that'll eventually become part of the United States. When we look at where Texas fits in here, Texas or Mexico is having a hard time bringing settlers into the northern part of their territory. So this would be Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, the southern part of California, Colorado, Utah. It's pretty sparsely populated. So what they're going to do is they're going to offer cheap land grants to Americans in exchange for 3 simple things. One is that you become a Mexican citizen, that you convert to Roman Catholicism, and that you follow and obey the Mexican Constitution. Well, part of the problem there is that the Mexican Constitution outlaws slavery. It's banning slavery. So what happens is Americans flee in there. Pretty soon, Americans are going to outnumber the Mexicans that live in Texas. And they're refusing to kind of go along with their agreement. They take the cheap land grants, but they really don't do any of the other things. And what they is going to eventually happen is Santa Anna is going to take over Mexico, and he is going to want to force them to live up to their agreements. Texans don't like it. They revolt in 1834, and then you have this war for Texan independence. They eventually win and get their independence, and they become the Republic of Texas. One of the problems with this peace agreement is there isn't a, well, one side believes that it's the Nueces River, the other side believes it's the Rio Grande River as the border between the two, and so this is going to be a disputed territory. What Texas realizes pretty early on is being an independent republic really isn't good for their business. So what they do is they seek annexation. They want the United States to make them part of the United States. When President Polk gets into office, he is an expansionist, and he is more than willing to bring Texas into the United States. So pretty quickly, Congress annexes Texas. We move troops into this disputed territory, and at some point there is a clashing where Zachary Taylor reports back that there's this border war going on. The U.S. forces and military come in, and pretty quickly this whole thing is over. So the summer of 1846 it starts. By September of 1847, we're going to sign a peace agreement known as the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And so we get all of what used to belong to Mexico here, which is Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah, parts of Colorado. And then eventually we're going to buy this little piece here called the Gadsden Purchase. Really, we're looking at that for the potential of building a southern route for the Transcontinental Railroad. Regardless, we increase the size of the United States by a third. It's a pretty hefty chunk of our country, and we're growing. So settlers are going to flock to California. What's really going to speed up that process is the discovery of gold. Once gold is discovered, you're going to have all kinds of people going in there trying to strike it rich. It's going to begin as placer miners, these small independent miners. It's a pretty rough life. There isn't a whole lot of structure out there. It isn't like there's hospitals or schools or anything like that. And these towns are going to just boom up overnight. One of the problems that the miners are going to run into is that pretty quickly they're going to get pushed out by big industrial mining, because that's the thing that can really get deep into the earth and get into these big deposits of iron ore. When we look at the effects of this, it's going to have a really negative impact on natives and the Hispanics that had already lived there. Their rights are going to get kind of trampled. When you look at the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, Hispanic Americans were guaranteed their property rights, and that just simply isn't going to happen. They're going to get ignored, and courts are really reluctant to be able, or to kind of back, I guess, these Hispanic American claims. The other thing it's going to do is California is going to quickly apply for statehood, and it's going to upset this delicate political balance of 15 to 15. And California is going to enter as a free state, and so that means for slave states, they're going to be outnumbered in the Senate. And so this is going to be a pretty hotly contested and debated addition to the United States. And so we're going to kind of see the fallout of that in the next chapter. So in 1850, this is what the United States looks like. Again, we're going to pick up this Gadsden Purchase, and then pretty much the continental part of the United States is in place.